A small square of carved stone, a bull with one horn. Above it, a row of marks. The stone is 4,000 years old. For 100 years, we have tried to read those marks. We never have. This is the script of the Indus civilization, one of the largest urban societies of the ancient world. Since the first attempt in 1877, more than 100 decipherments have been published. Not one has been accepted. But underneath the failure is a stranger question. One scholars are still openly fighting over, not what the script says, whether it says anything at all. For most of the 3rd millennium BC, a civilization stretched across the northwestern Indian subcontinent, from the coast of the Arabian Sea to the foothills of the Himalayas. We call it the Indus or Harappan civilization. Its mature urban phase is conventionally dated to roughly 2600 to 1900 BC. Planned cities, standardized brick, covered drains, long-distance trade, and a writing system, if that is what it is. It survives almost entirely on small objects, stamped seals of carved steatite, the clay ceilings they were pressed into, and inscribed tablets. The standard catalog, compiled by the epigraphist Iravatham Mahadevan in 1977, recorded about 2,900 inscribed objects and 417 distinct signs. Count everything excavated since the 1870s, and the figure is now around 5,000 inscriptions. That sounds like a lot. It isn't. The inscriptions are extraordinarily short, on average 4.6 signs. The longest text on any single surface has 17. Fewer than one inscription in 100 reaches even 10. They were generally written right to left, some lines reversing direction, back and forth in what scholars call bustrophodon. The first Harappan seal was found in 1872 or 73, and the first attempt to read it followed in 1877. The civilization itself was only announced to the world in 1924 by the archaeologist John Marshall. A lost civilization with a lost script. 100 years later, the seals are still silent. To crack an unknown script, you classically need one of 3 things. A bilingual text, the same message in a known language beside the unknown one. That is how Egyptian hieroglyphs fell to the Rosetta Stone, a known related language to anchor it to, or a very large body of long, varied text, enough to let the structure reveal itself. For the Indus script, all 3 are missing. No bilingual has ever been found. The underlying language is unknown. The texts are not long and varied. They are a few signs each. And there is no demonstrated link to any later writing system, including Brahmi, the ancestor of most South Asian scripts. There is one apparent exception. At Dolavira, in a chamber by the North Gate, excavators found 10 large signs that had once been inlaid in gypsum on a wooden board, roughly 3 meters long. The wood rotted away. The arrangement of the signs survived in the ground. Each sign stood about 37 centimeters tall. It is one of the longest Indus inscriptions known, and the only one placed like a monument over a gateway for a population to see. Scholars who believe the script is true writing point to it constantly, but even the number of signs is disputed. Mahadevan counted 417, Asko Parpola, fewer. A 2015 inventory by Brian Wells counted closer to 700. That disagreement is not pedantry. A small, stable set of signs looks like an alphabet or a syllabary. A large, growing one looks like word signs, or like something that was never language at all. For decades, one research program dominated the field. It was led by Asko Parpola, an Indologist at the University of Helsinki, and by Iravatham Mahadevan, who built the standard corpus. Their argument? The Indus script is logo-syllabic, signs standing for words and syllables, and it records an early form of a Dravidian language, the family that today includes Tamil. Their showcase is a single sign, a fish. It works through what is called the rebus principle, using a word sound to write a different word that sounds the same. In reconstructed Proto-Dravidian, the word for fish is meen, and meen is also the word for star, so when the fish sign appears in certain seals, Parpola reads it not as fish but as star, and those inscriptions become astronomical, calendrical. A pun, 4,000 years old, used as a key. It is an elegant idea and an old one. The fish equals meen reading predates Parpola, proposed earlier by Henry Harras and by the Mayanist Yuri Knorozov. Parpola laid it out in full in his 1994 book, Deciphering the Indus Script, from Cambridge University Press. It is the most developed linguistic program for the script, and it is taken seriously, but it has never been confirmed. It remains a hypothesis. And in 2004, 3 scholars argued the entire project rested on an assumption that might be false. In 2004, the scholars Steve Farmer, Richard Sproat, and Michael Witzel published a paper in a peer-reviewed journal with a deliberately provocative title, The Collapse of the Indus Script Thesis. Their claim was radical. The Indus symbols, they argued, are not writing at all. Their words, a non-linguistic sign system that served key religious, political, and social functions without encoding speech. What if the reason no one can read it is that there is nothing to read? Their evidence was not rhetorical. First, the brevity, an average under 5 signs, a maximum of 17, over more than 600 years of use, with none of the lengthening you would expect from a maturing script. Second, the absence of any machinery of writing. No inkpots, no styli, no long texts on durable goods, no scribal evolution of sign shapes. The idea that long Indus manuscripts once existed on perishable material and were simply lost is an assumption, not a finding. And third, the statistics. They showed that the way Indus signs are distributed, a few signs doing most of the work, closely matches a system that is definitely not language, medieval Scottish heraldry, the formal symbols of coats of arms. This was not fringe. It was a peer-reviewed challenge, and it forced the entire field to defend an assumption it had treated as obvious for a century. If they are right, the Indus script is not undeciphered. It is unreadable because it was never speech. In 2009, the answer seemed to come from mathematics. A team led by the computer scientist Rajesh Rao published a paper in the journal Science. They measured something called conditional entropy, essentially how predictable each sign is, given the one before it. They ran it on the Indus inscriptions and compared the result against natural languages and against systems known to be non-linguistic, including human DNA and bacterial proteins. Their finding, in their own words, the conditional entropy of the Indus inscriptions closely matches those of linguistic systems and remains far from non-linguistic systems. Most similar, they reported, to Sumerian and to Old Tamil. Headlines said the script had been shown to be language. The authors had said no such thing. Their own words, the result only increases the probability that the script represents language, not proof. Richard Sproat, one of the 2004 authors, replied in 2 peer-reviewed papers. His argument? Conditional entropy was never a test for language in the first place. Almost every symbol system, linguistic or not, falls between total order and total randomness. With a more careful procedure, he showed, both the Indus signs and the carved Pictish symbols of early Scotland classify as non-linguistic. The exchange was sharp, and it did not resolve. That is the honest state of the central question. After 2 decades of statistics, not settled, genuinely open. In January 2025, the question stopped being only academic. At an international conference in Chennai, the chief minister of the Indian state of Tamil Nadu, M.K. Stalin, announced a prize of $1 million for anyone who could decipher the Indus script to the satisfaction of experts. In his words, the riddle hasn't been answered for the past 100 years despite several efforts. The prize did not come from nowhere. It was tied to a recent study by the archaeologists K. Rajan and R. Sivananthan, comparing thousands of marked potsherds from Tamil Nadu with Indus-era artifacts and reporting a high rate of matching symbols. The authors were careful to say it was a comparison of shapes, not a decipherment. Here the topic touches something larger than archaeology. Whether the Indus people spoke a Dravidian language, ancestral to Tamil, or an early Indo-Aryan one, is bound up with modern Indian identity and with a long, charged debate about who the subcontinent's first civilization belonged to. At its worst, this has produced outright fabrication. In the year 2000, a widely promoted decipherment hinged on a seal said to show a horse, which 2 scholars, Witzel and Farmer, showed was a digitally altered image of a broken bull seal. The script itself cannot settle any of this. It is too short, and there is no key. A third position sidesteps the language fight entirely. The researcher Bahata Ansumali Mukhopadhyay argues the inscriptions are administrative, tax, trade, and licensing records, carrying no personal names at all, and not spelling out speech. Structured, meaningful, but perhaps not language. For this story, the open questions are not a footnote. They are the whole point. We do not know whether the Indus script is writing. That is not a detail still being polished. It is the live fault line in the field. We do not know what language, if any, lies underneath it. Dravidian is the leading candidate, and it is unproven. We do not know why the inscriptions are so short. Either the long texts were written on something that rotted away, or there were never any long texts, because the system was never meant to carry them. Those two answers point to completely different paths. We do not know how many signs there even are, 400 or 700, and we do not know what the seals were for. Names, clan emblems, tax tokens. Each answer is a different kind of meaning, and only one of them is language. Could a longer text still be in the ground? Many Indus sites have never been excavated. Even the researchers who have looked hardest with computers, Rao and his colleague Nisha Yadav, are openly cautious. Yadav has said plainly that we still do not know whether the signs are whole words, or parts of sentences. What is really needed, Rao has said, is more text. Ideally a bilingual. There may not be one. 100 years of staring, and we still cannot say whether anyone 4,000 years ago was saying anything at all.